Hello, welcome to Mentoring Mondays. I'm Stacy.
And I'm Nicole. We are two industry experts bringing you insights from the big business of fashion to the startup entrepreneur. This is a 4-part series covering the basics of small batch manufacturing.
Last week we discussed the overview of small batch production. This week we will be discussing the challenges. The reality is that it's not an option for most startup fashion entrepreneurs to do large volume. So it really isn't. It's something to understand in terms of the impact on the environment and the exploitation of individuals who are working offshore. But the reality is more than likely you're going to be making on your own or in this small quantity format. So we do want to prepare you for the challenges that you may face taking this approach with small batch. Large factories stateside are at full capacity. They're usually very busy. And so when they do have a startup entrepreneur reaching out to them, you're probably not given the service that a larger company would receive.
Yeah, and that tends to be because entrepreneurs they're not familiar with the production process, and that leads to a lot of education on the part of the factory that they just don't have the time to do. Yeah, it's not economical for a factory to incur the setup costs and time that they need to produce just a really small run of something. It's not worth it for them.
Yeah. And also a challenge which the entrepreneur must be mindful is just the actual cost. So even if you're going to make a t-shirt, there's a certain amount of fabric you're buying per yard, standard trims, all these different things that adds up to quite a large amount. So even if you are doing this small batch production, you have to be on top of your financials to see if this is feasible for you.
Yeah, a lot of places that you will source fabric from, they're going to have minimums. You can't buy the exact amount you need to produce, say, 50 t-shirts or something. You need to buy more fabric. That means that you're generally sitting on stock. So that's money that's tied up in fabric that you're not necessarily using. Minimums are a big thing with entrepreneurs. You do need to order minimum quantities from most of your suppliers, and that's because it's more economical on a per piece basis. But then that does tie up some of your finances in your materials. So it's tough to strike the right balance, but you can get around that with some smart sourcing. There's some places that do specifically cater to small batch manufacturers.
Also, there's the challenge to scale. So although you are an individual who's sewing this one item and sending it directly to the client, even to go from 1 unit to 10 units, you have to be mindful of that same sort of calculation, and then getting into that what's considered in your case small batch. If that small batch for you may mean 20 units, it could mean 100 units, but being mindful of that growth transition can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, so to hire somebody else to do your 10, 20, 50 units, you need to pay a skilled sewer to create it for you, and then that's your labor overhead. Then you need to add on to that the fabric stock that you're using. So basically, made to order is different than making a production and then selling it. So most of the time, made to order, you're going to have just enough materials on hand. You're going to make something that somebody has ordered, or you're going to have made one thing and then sell it to the person who ordered it off of Etsy or wherever. When you are doing production, because in order to make it economical, you need to do volume. That's, economy of scale. That means that you are going to be sitting on product until you sell it. So that's why it's really important to have a good solid marketing plan in place. It's important to have a good website. It's important to get out there on social media and just make sure that you're able to actually sell your product after it's made.
Yeah, and just a little tip, there are crowdfunding platforms so that you could potentially pre-sell your collection or some of that production in advance, so that could help meet some of those fixed costs of buying raw materials and everything.
So one of the other issues that makes producing small batch in the US more, a little bit more tough for the entrepreneur is the cost of labor in the US is considerably higher than in a lot of the places where we get our clothes produced, such as in China or India or Central America. But as you have probably seen in some of the headlines, those factories are not safe for the workers. That fire in Bangladesh that killed all those garment workers was because they're just producing cheap clothing in unsafe environments. So there's a trade-off. You can buy one of those $5 t-shirts from Target that was made in a factory that killed people, or you spend a little bit more and it's made in a factory ethically by people who are paid a living wage in a safe environment. So that again kind of ties back to educating the consumer. Like when they're given those two choices, most people are going to choose the non-exploitative way of manufacturing. So
we're also seeing the pushback from offshore more recently when bills were not paid, factories were not paid, workers were left starving because larger businesses left them with the inventory. So we have to be mindful how reliant we are on offshore manufacturing. So although it's a challenge for us to do volume, we're encouraging you to do the small batch because of that sensitivity to the market and to the people that are making your garments. Thank you so much for joining us this week as we discuss the challenges, but next week we'll be talking about the solutions for small batch production. If you would like to learn more about the industry, sign up for our newsletter.
And if you're a fashion entrepreneur looking to take your business to the next level, visit SEWBROMO.com and check out our entrepreneur courses.